So I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Explain Yourself. We're still at the Entomological Society meeting, and this time I am with Hannah, who has agreed to speak with us. So thank you so much for being here and coming on Explain Yourself. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you for having me.
So I like to start everybody off. Could you give us your elevator pitch for your current research?
My current research. Well, so I have a dissertation research and like postdoc research.
Oh, ooh, okay. Well,
So,
you pick.
okay. Well, I'll give you a lowdown on my dissertation research since it's done.
Okay.
And so I'm essentially looking at variation across the landscape for ant food webs and agricultural systems.
Okay.
So how ants are acting as ecosystem engineers and providing biological control within these very, very disturbed habitats.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. All right. So
Yeah.
that's your elevator pitch. And are you a fan of XKCD?
Yes, actually,
Awesome.
I have. They have a comic about ants, and that's been on my office wall since it came out. So.
Fantastic. Well, in that case, have you heard of the Simple Writer?
No, actually.
Alrighty. So the creators of XKCD came up with this Simple Writer. So what you do,
Okay.
you're going to type words into the box, I study such and
Yeah.
such, and you're going to redo your elevator pitch for us. But the catch is that this thing will turn red any words that are not the 100 or 1,000 simplest words or most commonly used words in the English language. So
Oh
this is
my.
a hyper reduction of your jargon.
Okay.
And I will warn you that bug and insect are not in there. They will turn red, which is really frustrating.
Okay.
So, all right. So, Hannah's really, really simple version of her
Really
elevator
bad.
pitch is, I study how changes in grasses and trees change what good animals eat. Nice.
I
Yes.
would not have thought to go that simple, honestly.
And it is a
So-
goofy, over-exaggerated example, but jargon is something that we should be constantly thinking about when we're
Definitely.
doing science communication, because, I mean, I glazed over today listening to somebody talk about something, I don't know, they were using words that I didn't understand, and it makes it much harder to sort of feel invested in the conclusions that they're making. So yeah, I just like giving people that challenge because it's fun to think about jargon.
It's a good challenge.
But you are no longer restricted to the 100 or 1,000 simplest words. So now you
Okay.
can use your regular vocabulary.
My regular vocabulary.
But still keeping our audience in mind, and tell us a little more, in-depth version of what you're doing.
So I look at essentially how changes in the level of trees and grasses and just different kinds of plants across a landscape vary around farmlands, and how that changes what is on the farms in terms of insect pests that eat crops, and then what eats those insect pests. We have good insects that also attack those insects that we can kind of use to help growers actually just attack the pest and help with their farm production. And so that's what I study, but then I actually do that by dissecting out the guts of the good insects and then looking at the DNA in them to see what they ate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I get really excited anytime somebody says dissect. That's great.
It's a lot of fun until it's really tedious, and you have to really balance your caffeine consumption. So I had to be like, okay, 2 cups like a half an hour before, and you get this many hours on that caffeine to
Fair enough.
get it.
So when you say landscape level, you're thinking about things like hedgerows or forests that are adjacent to agricultural lands?
So within several miles. So if I'm standing like just in a field, so if I'm just standing in a cornfield, what's around me for the surrounding like 5 miles.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a circle from where that is in 5 miles.
And you have 5 miles because insects can mostly fly.
Yeah,
right?
well,
Okay.
ants are really cool. So when they can just like pick up their colony and like walk, so they can walk just a few meters or a few feet. And I've actually looked at that, just kind of like mapped where they go through the year in a field, which is also just really bizarre and
Whoa.
fun. But then they also fly like several times a year. They have mating flights where they just all go up like several hundred feet at least into the air, and they all just kind of get blown around by the wind, and so they just kind of land wherever, and so they can disperse pretty far.
Wow,
So-
that's neat. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can find something in a forest, and then it will also wind up in the field, or vice versa.
Yeah, I also have like some spider data as well as my ant data, and we
Yeah.
found that spiders are definitely coming from forests, and they have this thing. So instead of having wings, they have silk, and so
Yeah.
they just send up the line of silk, and called ballooning, and they're adorable when they do it. And
It does. It
they're
looks
lot
like
of
a
fun.
balloon. Yeah. So those are your good insects, the ants
Right.
and the spiders. What are the bad insects that you're worried about?
So I was based out of Kentucky when I did this work, so we were looking at things like Japanese beetle, which is a problem in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And they eat like 400 species of plants, so it can kind of transfer not just from agricultural production, but you can go, be concerned about what's in your backyard. We also have a beetle called grape colospis beetle. It's about like yay big, and it's like just adorably this taupe little beetle with a bunch of little lines on it. And we have green clover worms, which they're really fun because when you pick them up, they just start thrashing everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and they have a really cool mechanism that when they feel threatened, they actually drop from a silk line on the plant. And so they just have a lot of really fun behavior.
So are those like, because I've definitely walked through the forest before and like seen a caterpillar just like hanging out in the middle of the air and like almost walk into it. Is it, and they're little and green,
so it's probably not
so is it
that one, because these ones really like clover and alfalfa.
Okay.
And they hang out in soybean fields some too.
Okay. But it's a similar
yeah.
mechanism. Okay, cool.
Which actually there's like a whole other, I don't study it, but I really like to listen to stories where like wasps will actually like climb down the line and parasitize them. Like they specialize in finding them. So
That's cool.
they have this like sweet like Spider-Man thing to get away, and then it doesn't work. So you feel kind of bad for them.
Fair enough, yeah.
But yeah, so those are some of the things we're worried about. Because Kentucky, we just have a bunch of pests, not just like one particular thing right now. So it's kind of fun.
Okay.
Keeps my life like really exciting because you never know what's going to come up.
And you said that you came to the conclusion of that research because that was your doctoral research, right? So what were your conclusions? What did you get out of that?
So it's actually really cool. One, if we have kind of more things in the landscape, so if you have like trees and grass and alfalfa, just more of that, you actually get more ants in your farmland, which is really cool. And then that in turn means that they actually are more likely to follow the pest around. And then if you also have more things kind of surrounding your farmland, you have fewer pests. But when the ants follow the pests around, they actually end up eating them, and so potentially we can have this really cool, like if we change what's in the landscape around a farm, then we can alter what's actually happening in a particular field. So we can actually change how things interact so that they can eat different things.
Okay, that's really cool. So there are ways to take care of pests on our food without having to use any sort of chemical or even like any human physical effort, just by having a more diverse landscape.
It's kind of like, in terms of the pest, it's like putting an obstacle course in front of them where they can't get to the food that they want to eat, but it's like providing a shortcut for the ants, to get to what they want to go to.
Awesome.
So it's kind of this like, fun way to think about it. Trees are obstacles and different things.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. I like that. So what is your favorite thing about your research?
Oh man. I really actually just like going outside and being completely bewildered by what's happening. Like if I just go out and I'm like, what is even happening here? Actually, this happened to me this summer because I was going out studying ants and how they're interacting with seeds and if they were, eating them or if they're just like trucking them around, because sometimes they do that for fun. But then they weren't doing anything that I thought that they should be doing based on what we had previously thought. And so it was just kind of really fun to just sit out there and be like, you just watch and try to figure out what is making sense and what isn't making sense. And then what could possibly explain that, which we actually ended up having like a deer issue, which threw in like a whole wrench. So that's next direction.
Interesting. So curiosity and wonder and
and just being outside and like watching like really bizarre things and wondering like why, because honestly ants don't make any sense when you watch them. Like on the whole, they're like, I feel like everyone's taught me like ants are really smart, they're the super organism that they act like a brain, and you go out there and like you watch the individual ants and you're like, these ants are so stupid. Like what are they doing? And so just making sense of that, because it's the individual ants that make up that brain, and so you're trying to figure out like how that actually functions is really interesting.
I love that.
So
it's so amazing, all of the things that we don't know.
Yes. I had a project where I inebriated some ants and they were really bad at just life, like even when they weren't inebriated. So they're really fun to mess with.
That sounds like fun.
It was. It was and we videotaped them, and they were like the drunk ants, essentially is what I call them, would just like fall over and kind of kick around in a circle like a dog would, like just if you had a dog on the floor, just like go in a circle.
Interesting.
It was a good time.
So you say you called them drunk, but they weren't actually drunk. Were they under the influence of something else?
Yeah, we were actually exposing them to a common insecticide. So it's an insecticide that's actually common to treat ants in people's lawns, but they're using it in agricultural systems, but they haven't actually studied what it does to ants in agricultural systems. So what's happening is it's not killing them, but they're getting essentially a dose that makes them drunk.
Okay.
And so we were just kind of figuring out like how that actually enables them, like can they actually make it to a food? You know, can they feed themselves when they're drunk, or, you know, can they walk? And so we found that they're really bad at doing that stuff when they're drunk.
Probably.
But we had another wrench thrown in where it was like the insecticide was actually not as effective at making them drunk or killing them as a fungicide was.
Oh,
so it was like out of left field, something that came up. But it was a really fun project.
And that's important if you're studying these insects that are good for agricultural fields, but something else that gets put on the agricultural field can be bad for the good insects.
Yeah.
How do you make the decisions about what you do, right?
Yeah, it's, you know, there's a trade-off, especially if you're a farmer, like you have all these costs. Like these things aren't cheap to put out there, so you want to know that it's working and it's not actively harming other things. So
were the ants drunk for like forever once they'd been dosed, or could they sort of like deal with the chemical and get rid of it and then go back to normal?
So we only watched them for 2 days, but they were pretty bad after that. So,
and 2 days in the lifespan of an ant isn't,
especially, so they were ants that are outside of the nest, and so all the young ants hang out inside the nest and take care of the young, and then so it's the older ants that are like pretty much at death's door anyways that are on the outside. So we don't know how much time they had left. Well, we had controls, so where we didn't make them drunk, and they did live fine.
Okay.
But
that's in the lab, and if I was a bird out in the field, a drunk ant would be very easy to catch and eat.
If you're
right?
a spider or something,
Okay, so it definitely has, even if they don't die outright, it can still really affect them. And, okay.
Yeah, and what kind of food that they can bring home, and they're really bad at life when they're drunk.
Okay. and you've talked, you've mentioned it I think twice now, something about getting a wrench thrown in. And so is there something that you really dislike about your research, or something that really frustrates you?
I think the most frustrating thing is the amount of time it takes to figure out how to get the wrench back out or what to do with the wrench. Like, you know, it's like a whole new problem, and you're kind of like, you know, how do you even deal with this? And so sometimes like there's no precedent set for it, so you're just kind of like, well, you just have to mess around with it. And I've actually even like called my dad on the phone because he's an engineer, and I'm just like, do you have just like any bizarre ideas to like get at this?
Cool.
Because, you know, I've come at it from like my side of things, but I have all these like preconceptions about how it's supposed to be like this, and so that, I think that's the most frustrating thing, is how long it takes to figure this stuff out.
Problem solving. That's a thing.
Yes. So.
What made you decide to become a scientist, and also what made you decide to go to grad school instead of just stopping with your undergrad?
Okay, those are great questions, which hopefully I have good answers for.
Okay.
So I've actually always wanted to be a scientist. Like I remember as a kid being like, it's either bugs or rocks. Like that's it.
Okay.
I had a rock collection, I had a bug collection, and it was kind of like
cool.
And actually the defining moment was I was in middle school, and since my parents knew I really liked bugs and rocks, they're like, okay, well, we know there's a bug facility down the road. So there's a really bad pest that really demolishes oranges in Florida where I grew up.
Okay.
And so there's a facility that specifically deals with that. And so I got to tour that as a middle schooler, and it was just like, I was hooked. I was like, okay, we get to like play with flies all day, and there's microscopes, and we get to go outside. And so I think it was from then I was like, bugs.
I'm so glad your parents were cool with that, because I feel like like a lot of kids who bring bugs into the house, that's like not well received.
No, they were awesome. Like I remember putting like bugs in my lunchbox, and like they were alive, and then taking my lunchbox home and not telling my mom, and they would definitely be all over the kitchen. So I give them like kudos, because it was probably a handful. So
that's excellent.
Although I do make fun of them because they didn't allow me to have ant colonies growing up, like ant farms, and so now I'm like compensating for it because I have like 20. So
in your house or in your lab?
both.
Awesome.
So, and
Awesome.
cockroaches, but separate thing.
Okay, so that was why you wanted to be a scientist.
Yeah, and then graduate school, I think was just kind of a natural. So I did a lot of research in undergraduate. Like I actually got to work with a bunch of different labs. I think I worked with like 4 different professors, and I kind of got to feel out like all these kinds of research. And I just thought that was really fun, and I wanted to keep doing that. And I think it's in graduate school that I wanted it to be more applied, something more directly useful to people. And so I'm kind of at that intersection right now where I'm like 1 foot in kind of basic biology and then 1 foot in actually like having, something that I can show my farmers, be like, this is what I've done this summer. Like you let me walk through your fields, this is how many pests you have,
And that's been a theme in a bunch of these interviews, that we're all we see the value of the pure science, but it is really nice to be able to say, hey, I published this paper and you can use what I found out right now. Like that, there's something very rewarding about that, right?
Yeah. Well, and even just like talking to people that, I work with, and I'm like, okay, my grandma has a bed bug problem or, like mosquito problem, like this is what you can do. And so that's really satisfying to actually have this information on hand that I can answer people's questions.
Awesome. So you are still early career, you're doing your postdoc, and you're very early into your postdoc. So what do you think is something that you still really need to work on cultivating in yourself as a researcher?
So I think honestly being a people manager.
Oh.
Yeah, that was not something I really expected to have to be good at. I think when I was an undergraduate going into graduate school, I was like, I have to be good at research, I have to be good at writing and, public speaking to some extent, but I didn't realize how much I had to be good at like making sure people know what they need to do and kind of motivating them to do it. And actually, as a postdoc, I've been put in charge of getting a couple undergraduates for the lab I'm in now and kind of monitoring what they do, and it's definitely been a growing experience because I'm definitely not used to telling people what to do. I'm used to being the person told what to do. So it's been good.
Leadership is hard.
Yeah.
And I think so many people have this concept that we just like, oh, it's a scientist in a lab and they're doing their thing. But like, we could not do this if we were just doing it alone. There's so much labor that goes into doing science that we have to work in teams.
Well, and a lot of undergrads that like, you know that this isn't what they want to end up doing, but they want to be able to learn from you, and making that experience worthwhile for them is also really challenging, in addition to kind of also guiding them in their own careers. And so it's definitely been probably the biggest challenge that I need to build up more.
Yeah.
So.
But it sounds like you're going to be getting a lot of good experience doing that. So.
I hope so. I hope I don't disappoint them either. So. But they're troopers. We've dragged them through the field a couple of times already, and they've like gone above and beyond. So.
Undergrads, we will always love you.
Yes. You are our lifeblood.
Yes.
Like, we might not tell it to you, but like, we literally couldn't do anything without you.
That is so true. So let's flip that. What is the thing that you think is your greatest strength as a researcher?
So I really like mixing and matching different fields. So I don't want to say I get bored with like one topic, but I feel like I just love going down these little like rabbit holes where I'm like, that's weird, let's go look into that. And so I think, one, I can still get my stuff done that I need to get done, but also kind of combining like new methods together, or like this was a method used over here but not over here, and kind of like throwing those two things together to get at a problem that a little bit differently than maybe we have before.
Yeah, we definitely have to be jacks of all trades, because you have to know how to do the math and the science, and sometimes you have to build things or adapt methods.
Yes, I've done a little bit of all of that, so, which can be frustrating also, because then you're also like, somebody is an expert in this somewhere, and like they probably know how to do this in 5 minutes. So building that information is also kind of a challenge.
Yeah. That's so experts, are there any scientists that you really look up to or want to, be more like your science heroes? My science heroes.
So one of my teachers got me a book called For the Love of Insects by Eisner, I believe, and he did a bunch of really awesome experiments where he just like put a bunch of gross stuff in spider webs in Florida, and fed bluebirds, like horrible tasting things. And honestly, I think just having the wonder at everything that he studied just really is inspiring to me. So I really like that. And then also, actually, as an undergraduate, I worked under Mickey Eubanks at Texas A&M, and he, I think, really impacted me in terms of like writing and getting excited about writing both science papers and kind of, you know, discussing it more broadly.
Awesome.
So
you mentioned that sometimes you get bored and want to sort of diversify. So what if somebody came up to you right now and was like, Hannah, you can never, ever, ever study insects ever again? What organismal group would you turn to instead?
Do spiders count as insects
No
in this case?
No arthropods, nice try.
Dang it. I would have gone with spiders because I still study spiders.
They're so similar though. No crunchy things.
This is a very good question. Well, one of my current lab mates studies earthworms, and they're pretty weird and wild.
Yeah.
So that would be fun, but they're challenging also. So.
Well, there's how do you even trap for earthworms? like that's a question that's right at the top of my head.
So originally, the only way to do it was you dump a bunch of like salty water onto the ground and then electroshock it, which is a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
Because then you're standing in water electroshocking it. But now we have like, you just buy mustard powder, like just ground up mustard, like, you know, mustard that
like a condiment?
Yeah.
Okay.
But like you buy this powder and it's all commercial food grade, and then you dilute it with just water, and it smells like lemonade that's mustard. It's really bizarre. And then you just dump a bunch of this on the ground, and it really irritates the worm's skin, and so they come up because they just hate it and they want to get away from it.
Interesting.
So that's how you get worms out of the ground. Yeah.
Learn something new every day. So worms hate mustard.
Worms hate mustard.
Cool.
So
I'm like really interested in like how somebody discovered that. Yeah.
I am too, actually, and I have wondered that like to my lab mates, and they're like, we don't know, but it's safer and it's a little bit lighter to carry through the woods than a bunch of car batteries. So.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. All right. So you would study earthworms. That's cool. Yeah. Do you have specific earthworm questions or just?
Well, so I've had a side project with my current lab mates, and we were actually studying how earthworms and ants are kind of competing for space underground. And so that's kind of fun because we don't actually know anything too in depth about earthworm behavior and what they're doing. Like we kind of like, we all think they're good, but there's also some kind of flip sides to them too, where they can also be bad. And
well, they're technically invasive on this continent, right? Like they are not from here.
So we have some natives, but the big ones that you think about, they're definitely invasive, and there's a few other ones that are also not so good. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they're really bad for like forests, which means that, you know, the little mice that live in the forest don't have anywhere to live, and
Okay. Yeah. If you could go back in time and tell your younger self like one thing to watch out for, or like one thing that you had to learn the hard way so that your younger self wouldn't have to deal with that.
One thing I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah. What would you want to have known when you started?
I would have wanted to know, one, that citation managers exist. Because I can't tell, in pivot tables, citation managers and pivot tables.
The tables are so beautiful.
They have revolutionized my life. Like you don't even know.
So this is an extremely geeky answer, but I really love it because yes, I didn't know about either of those things when I started either, and they are both magical. So yes, even if you're thinking about doing any kind of research, both of those things.
Yes, in Excel, like have anyone who is good with spreadsheets teach you the ways of spreadsheets and pivot tables, because it will change everything.
And explain what a citation manager is, because I know what you're talking about. But.
So when you read kind of like the history of a specific problem or organisms, you have all these papers and you have to keep them in line, because then when you actually go to write up your stuff, you have to actually list all of these things, the previous research, and kind of in a way that explains your logic, like, oh, so-and-so said this, so this is kind
this is the background.
And you have to change how you list them at the end of your paper, and then doing that in a way that is not frustrating and very time consuming is through a citation manager, because you literally just import them and click a button and it does it for you, versus you going like line by line, changing every little thing, including like decimals and like uppercase letters. So
was there anything else that you wish you could tell yourself?
I wish I had learned to code sooner.
Ah, okay. So like using R for your statistics?
Yeah, so I actually did all my statistics during my PhD in SAS. And so it's a little bit different to switch to R, and then R is less of a user-friendly interface. I mean, SAS isn't that user-friendly, but R is less user-friendly.
At least until you kind of feel out where you're going with it. Yeah,
and I think you can do a lot of really cool stuff, and then I'm at the point where I think I just get more impatient, like, why don't I know this already? And so I think I would have been more, I don't know, in depth in my learning about it had I done it earlier, because you could do like really cool graphics with it, and like plug it in with other like computer programs and like have it automate stuff that you do, so you just save hours of work.
It's such a basic code that you can basically make it do anything. Yeah, it's pretty wonderful. So I wish I had gotten into that earlier. Fair enough. Those are all very good things to tell your younger self. Yeah.
And work out before every field season, because otherwise the first 2 weeks are horrible. Actually, I warned my undergrads out about that this summer, and they didn't believe me. And then like the first month, they were like, "Okay, we understand." And I was like, "Yeah, I learned that one the hard way."
And you walk through crop fields, right? And and I walk through the tall grass prairie, and it's just like it's a
carrying
lot of,
all your gear.
Yeah, you're carrying things, and it's a lot of walking. But then it's also like to walk like through or around or over plants is very
and not
very
crush
tiring.
them. Yes. And then you're doing it in the heat of the day in the summertime, so you have to be okay with that. Yeah.
Field work is not for everyone.
This is also a good thing for people to know.
But
you should know if you hate it.
Like do a summer season, and if you hate it, then go be a lab ecologist or scientist.
Just be honest with yourself. Like, there's no reason to be miserable.
No, and you can still do good science without going outside.
Yes.
So, yes.
There are enough people that are willing to do that, though. Just collaborate.
So the wrap-up question always is, what's next for you?
So I'm currently trying to wrap up my current projects, looking at, again, how ants are interacting with seeds, and then also how spiders are hanging out on tree species across Ohio. So that's currently what's on the horizon, and applying to, I like to call them real person jobs. More permanent positions. Feeling like an adult one day.
So are you looking at faculty type jobs? Okay,
So faculty and like USDA positions is what I'm currently looking at.
Nice.
So I like the combination of extension research, and then some USDA positions like also let you adjunct at a nearby university, so you still get a little bit of teaching. So it's a lot of fun.
So you don't want to not teach?
Yeah, I actually liked it way more than I thought I would as a graduate student. So I would still like that opportunity.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck as you move into your future career. I know faculty positions are getting fewer and farther between, but hopefully something comes your way that suits you, and
make something creative out of it.
So we'll thank Hannah for speaking with us, and if you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so that you can get notifications when I post new videos. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.